The foreclosure notice was taped to the front door when I pulled into the driveway at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. It was addressed to my father, David Hammond, and it said he had 60 days to pay $14,200 in missed mortgage payments, or the bank would begin proceedings to take the house. My phone had been ringing for 3 hours straight before I even got in the car. 12 missed calls, all from him. When I walked into the kitchen, he was sitting at the table with his head in his hands, and my brother, Marco, was standing by the refrigerator with his arms crossed. My father looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes and said, "Elena, thank God. The bank made some kind of mistake. The payment stopped going through. I need you to fix this." I set my purse on the counter, looked at the foreclosure notice, and then looked at him. "It's not a mistake, Dad. I stopped the payments. I stopped them 32 days ago." He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "What are you talking about? Why would you do that?" I pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. "Because I'm the biggest disappointment of your life. And disappointments don't pay bills." Welcome back to Reddit Drama Stories, where sometimes the child who carries everything gets tired of being told she never carried enough. Drop a comment below and subscribe so you don't miss the next story of quiet, prepared justice. My name is Elena Hammond. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a supply chain coordinator for a regional grocery distributor, a job that involves tracking inventory across 42 stores and making sure the trucks leave the warehouse on time. I spend my days solving problems other people create, which is a skill I learned long before I ever got a paycheck. That skill is the only reason my father still had a roof over his head for the last 7 years. And it's the same skill that made it so easy to remove that roof when I finally decided he didn't deserve it. My mother died in the spring of 2017, pancreatic cancer, 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. She was the center of our family, the person who balanced the checkbook and remembered the birthdays and made sure my father ate something other than frozen pizza. When she was gone, the household simply stopped functioning. My father, David, was a high school history teacher who'd spent 30 years grading papers and ignoring everything else. He didn't know how to pay the electric bill online. He didn't know the password for the mortgage account. He didn't even know which bank held the loan. So I stepped in because that's what the reliable daughter does. I was 27, working my first real job out of grad school, and suddenly I was managing 2 households, my own studio apartment and the 3-bedroom colonial where my father was drowning in paperwork he refused to read. At first, it was supposed to be temporary. I'd help him set up auto pay, get the bills organized, and he'd take over. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into years, and my father never once asked to take back control. He just assumed I would keep doing it. The mortgage was $2,200 a month. The utilities ran about $400. Property taxes were another $2,800 every year. Car insurance, home insurance, the water bill, the gas bill. When I added it all up, I was transferring roughly $2,100 every single month into an account I'd set up specifically to cover his expenses. 7 years, 84 months, $176,400. I know the number because I kept a spreadsheet. I keep spreadsheets for everything. My brother Marco was no help. He's 2 years younger than me, and he's spent his entire adult life pursuing business opportunities that never quite materialize. He tried selling life insurance, then timeshares, then cryptocurrency. Each venture lasted about 6 months before collapsing under the weight of his own unrealistic expectations. He lived with my father for most of those 7 years, supposedly to help out, but he never contributed a dollar to the household expenses. Not once. When I asked him about it, he'd say, "I'm building something, Elena. You wouldn't understand. You've always been the cautious one." My father agreed with him. Marco was the visionary. I was the safety net. The dynamic was so well established that nobody even questioned it anymore. I'd show up every Sunday with groceries and a folder of paid bills. My father would nod, thank me vaguely, and then spend the rest of the visit talking about Marco's latest project. I told myself I didn't mind. I told myself I was being a good daughter, that mom would have wanted me to take care of him, that someday he'd notice how much I'd done. That was my mistake. Not the helping, the waiting to be seen. The first push came on a Saturday in early June. My father's extended family held a barbecue every summer at my Aunt Carla's house, a sprawling ranch with a pool and a patio where 3 generations of Hammonds gathered to eat ribs and pretend they liked each other. I'd been looking forward to it in my own cautious way. I'd just been promoted at work. My title was now Senior Supply Chain Coordinator, with a $9,000 raise. And I thought maybe, in the warm glow of family and barbecue sauce, I'd finally get a moment of recognition. I arrived late because I'd stopped to pick up the potato salad my father had forgotten. When I walked through the side gate, balancing the bowl in one hand and a case of beer in the other, I heard my father's voice before I saw him. He was sitting at the picnic table with my Uncle Paul and a couple of cousins, and he was holding forth in that expansive, slightly tipsy way he got after his third beer. Marco is going to be huge, he was saying. This new business, the electric bike rentals, he's got the whole thing mapped out. He's going to be a millionaire by 40. I always knew he had it in him. One of the cousins asked about me. I heard my name and froze just out of sight, behind the trellis of climbing roses. My father sighed. Elena, she's fine, I guess. Steady job, nothing exciting. To be honest, she's the biggest disappointment of my life. All that potential. And she ended up doing logistics, whatever that means, not like Marco. Marco actually has dreams. The words landed in my chest like a physical blow, the biggest disappointment of my life. 9 words. I stood behind the trellis, gripping the potato salad, while my Uncle Paul said something in a low voice that I couldn't hear. My father laughed. It was a casual, dismissive laugh, the kind you make when you're talking about something that doesn't matter. I waited until my hands stopped shaking, and then I walked around the corner with a smile on my face and set the potato salad on the table. Hi, Dad. He looked up at me, and for 1 second I thought I saw something flicker in his expression, guilt maybe, or awareness that I might have heard. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Elena, there she is. Did you bring the beer? I nodded. Good girl. I didn't confront him that day. I ate a hot dog, made small talk with my cousins, and left early with a headache. On the drive home, I replayed those 9 words over and over until they lost all meaning and became just sounds. The biggest disappointment of his life. Me, the daughter who had kept his lights on for 7 years. Me, the daughter who had sacrificed vacations and new cars and a larger apartment so that he could stay in the house where my mother died. The biggest disappointment. Push 2 came 2 weeks later. My father called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice carrying that particular enthusiasm he only used when Marco was involved. Elena, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something. Marco's new business is ready to launch, but he needs a little help getting the financing. The bank wants a cosigner, someone with good credit, and you've always been so responsible with money. Would you be willing to sign? I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the spreadsheet of his bills, and I said, Dad, co-signing a loan means I'm legally responsible if Marco can't pay it back. You know that, right? He'll pay it back. He's got a solid business plan this time. The electric bike market is exploding. He just needs someone to believe in him. Have you co-signed? A pause. The bank said I don't qualify. My credit isn't strong enough, but yours is excellent. You've never missed a payment on anything. You're the perfect candidate. I told him I'd think about it. I didn't think about it. I just sat at my table and stared at the wall and felt something inside me shift. My father had called me the biggest disappointment of his life to anyone who would listen. But the moment he needed my credit score, I was the perfect candidate. He didn't want a daughter. He wanted a guarantee. If you've ever realized that someone you love sees you only as a resource, you know how that moment hollows you out. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Because what I found next was the thing that broke everything open. Push 3 came a month later, in late July. I had not signed the loan, and my father had been calling me every few days to ask why, his voice cycling between confused, hurt, and angry. Marco is really counting on this, Elena. You're the only one who can help. Don't you care about your brother? I kept telling him I needed more time to review the paperwork, which was a stall tactic, while I tried to figure out how to say the bigger thing I was only beginning to understand, that I didn't want to be the family's safety net anymore. But the real revelation came by accident. I was at my father's house, helping him sort through a pile of mail that had accumulated on the kitchen counter, when I found a bank statement from an institution I didn't recognize. The envelope was addressed to my father, but the return address was a credit union 3 towns over. I opened it without thinking. I'd been opening his mail for 7 years, handling his bills, filing his taxes. The statement showed a savings account with a balance of $31,847.52. The account had been opened in 2015, 2 years before my mother died. There were regular deposits, small ones $50 here, $100 there, and the balance had been growing steadily for nearly a decade. My father had a secret savings account with almost $32,000 in it, while I had been paying $2,100 a month to keep him afloat. While I had been skipping vacations and driving a 10-year-old car and telling myself that I was doing the right thing, he had been quietly stashing money away. Money that he never once offered to put toward his own expenses. Money that he'd hidden from me entirely. I took a photo of the statement with my phone, slid it back into the envelope, and put the envelope back on the pile. I didn't confront him that day either. I needed time to process the betrayal, to do the math on what this meant. The $176,400 I had spent over 7 years wasn't a sacrifice made for a struggling father. It was a subsidy that allowed him to build a secret nest egg while I drained my own. He wasn't incapable of managing money. He was just unwilling to manage his own when someone else would do it for him. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment and cried for the first time in years. Not because I was sad, but because I was furious. I was furious at myself for letting it go on this long. I was furious at my father for taking and never giving anything back except a dismissive laugh and a label, disappointment. And I was furious at Marco, who had coasted through life on my father's delusions while I did the actual work of keeping the family solvent. When I stopped crying, I opened my laptop and started making changes. I logged into the joint account I'd set up years ago, the one that received my monthly transfers and paid all of my father's bills, and I canceled every single automatic payment. The mortgage, the electric, the gas, the water, the car insurance, everything. I transferred the remaining balance into my personal savings account and closed the joint account entirely. Then I went into my bank's app and blocked all future transfers to any account associated with my father's name. It took about 45 minutes. 7 years of financial support undone in less than an hour. I sent my father a single text at 10:14 p.m. that night. It read, "Dad, I've stopped paying your bills. The mortgage, utilities, and all other household expenses are now your responsibility. You have 32 days before the next mortgage payment is due. I suggest you contact Marco." Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. If you're feeling that mix of dread and relief right now, believe me, I understand. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment, because what happened next was the confrontation I'd been avoiding my whole life. The calls started the next morning. My father called me 14 times before noon. I know because I counted the missed call notifications. His voicemails cycled through confusion, anger, and finally something that sounded almost like panic. Marco called 3 times. My Aunt Carla called once, her voice tight with disapproval. I didn't answer any of them. I needed my father to feel the weight of what was happening before I explained it to him. I needed him to understand that the money he'd taken for granted wasn't a natural resource. It was my labor, and I had turned it off. For the next 32 days, I focused on my own life. I went to work. I met friends for dinner. I started looking at apartments in a nicer part of town, ones with a dishwasher and a parking space and a closet big enough to hold more than 5 shirts. I didn't call my father. I didn't respond to his texts, which grew increasingly desperate as the weeks went on. The mortgage payment came due on September 1. On September 3, the bank sent a late notice. On September 15, they sent a formal warning. On September 28, the foreclosure notice was posted on the front door, and my father finally got through to me on the phone. Alina, please, I don't understand what's happening. The bank says the house is going to be taken. You have to help me, please. I'm begging you. His voice was cracked with fear, and a part of me wanted to cave. That part had been trained for 34 years to fix things when they broke. But I thought about the $31,847 in his secret savings account. I thought about his voice at the barbecue, casual and cruel, calling me the biggest disappointment of his life. I thought about the spreadsheet on my laptop, the one that tallied $176,400 in payments over 7 years. And I remembered that not once, not a single time, had he ever said thank you. I'll come over tomorrow, I said, but I'm bringing Uncle Paul, and I'm bringing the receipts. The next afternoon, I pulled into my father's driveway with a folder in my hand and my Uncle Paul in the passenger seat. Paul was my mother's brother, a retired contractor who had always been the quiet, observant presence at family gatherings. I had called him the night before and told him everything. The payments, the secret account, the words I'd overheard at the barbecue. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said, "I'll be there. Someone in this family should have been there for you a long time ago." My father was waiting in the kitchen. Marco was there too, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed and his face set in that expression of aggrieved innocence I'd seen 1,000 times before. The foreclosure notice was spread out on the table between them, along with a stack of late payment letters and a notepad covered in my father's frantic handwriting. "Alina, thank God. We need to." My father stopped when he saw Paul behind me. "Paul, what are you doing here?" "He's here as a witness," I said. I sat down at the table and opened my folder. Inside were 7 years of bank statements, the spreadsheet of expenses, and a printed photo of the secret savings account statement I'd found in July. I laid them out one by one. "Dad, for the last 7 years, I've paid every single one of your household bills, the mortgage, the utilities, the taxes, the insurance, all of it. The total is $176,400. I let the number sit in the air. My father's eyes went wide. "I did this because Mom asked me to look after you. I did it because I thought you needed help. And I did it because I wanted to believe that someday you'd actually see me." I pulled out the photo of the savings account statement. Then I found this. An account with almost $32,000 that you've been hiding from me for years. You weren't broke, Dad. You were just letting me pay for everything while you stashed your own money away. I looked at Marco. "And you. You've lived in this house rent-free for years, chasing one failed business after another, and you've never contributed a single dollar. Not one." Marco started to say something, but Paul held up a hand. "Let her finish." My father's face had gone pale. "Alina, I can explain." "You don't need to explain, Dad. I understand perfectly. You thought I'd keep paying forever because I always had. You thought you could call me the biggest disappointment of your life to anyone who'd listen, and I'd never find out. Well, I did find out. I heard you at the barbecue. Every word." I leaned forward, folding my hands on the table. "You said I was the biggest disappointment of your life. So let me be clear. Disappointments don't pay mortgages. Disappointments don't cover utility bills. Disappointments don't fund the retirement you didn't bother to save for. You have $32,000 in that secret account. You have a son who thinks he's a visionary. Figure it out between you. I'm done." The kitchen was silent. My father stared at the documents on the table like they were written in a language he couldn't read. Marco's jaw was tight, but he didn't say a word. Paul put a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "I'm proud of you, Elena. Your mother would be too." I stood up, closed the folder, and walked out of that kitchen for the last time. Behind me, the foreclosure notice sat on the table like a bill that had finally come due. The consequence was exactly what the numbers predicted. My father did not make the mortgage payment. The 60-day window came and went, and the bank began foreclosure proceedings. He used the secret savings account to hire a lawyer and delay the process, but the house was sold at auction 6 months later. He and Marco moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, and from what I hear from Paul, it's a tight fit. My father called me once after the auction, his voice hollow and tired, and said, "I'm sorry, Elena. I didn't realize how much you were doing. I should have." I told him I appreciated the apology, but I wasn't ready to rebuild the relationship yet. Maybe someday. Not now. Marco's electric bike business failed before it even launched. Without my co-signature, the bank denied the loan, and Marco blamed me for it in a text that was equal parts fury and self-pity. I didn't respond. Some fires you just let burn out on their own. I bought a condo 6 months after the confrontation, a sunny 2-bedroom with a balcony and a parking space and a walk-in closet. I paid the down payment with money I'd saved in the year since I'd stopped paying my father's bills. I still work in supply chain management. I still keep spreadsheets for everything. But now, those spreadsheets are filled with my own goals, a vacation fund, a retirement account, the kind of future I used to defer so that someone else could live theirs. $176,400 over 7 years. One secret savings account with $31,847.52 that should have gone toward the household but never did. One barbecue where 9 words changed the course of my life. And one foreclosure notice that finally made the math impossible to ignore. If you've ever been the person who gave and gave and gave, only to find out that your giving was being counted as an entitlement instead of a gift, you know how heavy that realization is. But you also know that the day you finally stop is the day you start getting your life back. You are not a disappointment. You are not a safety net. You are a person who deserves to be seen for what you give, and if the people you're giving to can't see that, they don't deserve what you're offering. What's something you've carried for someone else that you finally decided to set down? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your story. If this video meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Subscribe to Reddit Drama Stories, and I'll see you in the next one.